Walt, where's the kettle?
Oh, it had scale developing on the inside. It was a health hazard.
So where is it?
In the bin, obviously.
Okay, waste of $60, but here's what it is. Oh, Walt, the fridge? Why is it so short? Where's the freezer gone?
The freezer had a funky odor and I thought it might be radon, so I purged it.
Purged? So what is it, soaking in motor oil somewhere or something?
No, the bin.
Right, so the bin. You can just say the bin. Need I ask about the microwave?
Microwave radiation, James. Need I say more?
For God's sake, what about the iron? Come on, it's literally a hot piece of metal and some water. People have been ironing for hundreds of years. It's got to be completely harmless.
The iron was boring, James.
There are no boring parts, Walt. Only boring people.
No, not that kind of boring. It was so heavy, it was actually drilling a hole into the earth and extracting emeralds from it.
Oh, just like Elon Musk's
It's
dad.
not like Elon Musk's dad. I paid for the iron.
Google that if you need to know.
Oh, yeah. Fun. Yeah.
Our skits have, like, there's so many skits that where we've been like, well, on the podcast, we're, like, not very political. We're not those two white dudes with a podcast.
No.
We talk about the things we're passionate about.
Yes.
But if you really read into the skits, that's where you find our positions.
It's like Thrifty Thursdays.
Yeah.
Like, everyone knows the cowled merchant is, like, a communist, for sure.
Gay communists.
Gay. Oh, it's true. Canonically,
Yeah,
we
canonically.
know now. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast, where the actor is a vessel for the dreams of you, the audience. I'm your host, Walt.
Hello, Commander players. I'm the guy that disappears early at the office Christmas party, only to make a surprise reappearance much, much later. James.
Where'd you go?
That's the surprise.
The magic of Christmas can take you anywhere you like to go.
Look, office Christmas parties are always one of those things of like, has anyone seen Gerald? And then Gerald's dancing on a table with a tie around his head. And it's like, where
That's
the
surprise
hell did he
reappearance.
go?
Gotcha. A little too much eggnog.
Yeah.
And look at us go.
Special Christmas cheer was input into his body. Look, we've obviously got a transmission. That's why you're listening to us.
Yes.
That's why it's Friday morning.
That's what we do here.
However, before we get to the transmission, I have something a bit personal that I want to announce on behalf of my boyfriend. They have just started a GoFundMe because very excitingly, and I think I talked about this on a recent episode that said it was coming, so you might be expecting it, but Theo is getting top surgery, which is unbelievably exciting and such a huge step in their transition and like a huge thing for just life in general. I mean, like, if for reference, there is a link to the GoFundMe in the show notes. If you would like to go have a read of what Theo's wrote, they're talking about stuff like, you know, going to the beach and being in board shorts and no top and being able to throw a frisbee back and forth, being confident in who they are and how they feel in their body. It's a big thing.
It's a huge thing, and it's something that we're so lucky to have access to in this country. There's obviously areas of the world where either it is impossible or it is prohibitively expensive, and people fly.
Illegal.
Yes, it can be illegal in some places. People fly to other countries to get their gender affirming care. So we're so lucky it's legal in Australia, but it is still extremely expensive. I look seriously. Like, Theo is responsible for pretty much everything cool looking you've ever seen us make. Like,
Pretty much,
the album art you're looking at on your phone right now on Spotify, that's them. The Rule Zero template that some of you would have seen at conventions we've been to, and
It's
is
now
also
like
up on
flying around
it's
Australia.
flying around Australia in different game stores. That was made, like, designed entirely by Theo.
Our Twitch emotes that will be coming out very soon, they will be designed by Theo.
Our logo is designed by Theo. Like, seriously, they have done so. They're kind of the, I'm not going to say secret because it's not secret, but they are kind of the third member of the podcast. And they're such a fucking cool person. And yeah, I've personally put some money in. I think it's just so important for people to get the care that they need, and I'm so excited for Theo. It's gonna be fucking awesome.
It's gonna be really, really cool. I'm really, just to say it, I'm so proud of them of how far they've come in their journey.
Yeah.
Especially from where they started being. If you know Theo personally, you'll know a bit of their history. Their journey has just been unbelievably treacherous, and like it's just seeing them get to a point where they're, you know, confirming the date for their top surgery, which is something they've wanted for like 18 plus years.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Is huge. It's really special. And look, if you want to support this transition, you are supporting the podcast as well, because Theo's confidence and all that kind of stuff is going to bleed directly into what we do. Look,
definitely.
I love them so much, and if you love what we do on the podcast and want to support us in that way, please donate to this GoFundMe.
Every dollar counts.
Yeah, literally a dollar. You can donate any amount, and it will help. Click the link down in the show notes. I'll be posting it up in our Discord pretty frequently for the next like couple of months.
Sure.
So I'll be there for a long time. If you can't donate, share it. Share it across platforms that you're on, because that helps a lot as well. I'm just really, really proud of them, and I can't believe that it's actually finally happening. We've been talking about it for as long as we've been dating.
It's so cool. It's a massive step, and I'm pumped for them as well. We do have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Via Negativa. Sometimes the purest path is found when we eliminate that which detracts.
Via Negativa.
Yeah.
Is this... So the Space Commanders are like translating into other languages now?
I feel like they've probably cracked like
English.
human languages. They're like, we've got this algorithm that they've got Google Lens.
Yeah.
They've got access to Google Lens.
I imagine that they like set out like with like Space Commander like work, like they wanted to like find people, and they maybe started with a French content creator and they accidentally translated to Russian, and we were just the lucky ones that actually landed in English.
Maybe we intercepted a transmission. Maybe we've been imposters this whole time.
Potentially.
Anyway.
That makes me feel like we've wasted 2 years.
So it sounds like the thing they want is we're looking at cutting things away from decks.
Negativa, subtract, get rid of.
Exactly right. It's interesting though that the phrase they've used, via Negativa, this actually rings a bell with me and with another part of my life. So I think I might use as the structure for this transmission, like as we decode it, a story of a very, 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 very well-known and renowned theatre maker who was around about 50 to 100 years ago.
So is this going to be one of those episodes where you tell a little story?
I'm going to tell a little story.
I love these episodes. Hang on, I'll be right back. I'm going to get like comfy clothes. Yeah. I'm going to grab a teddy bear and some popcorn. And then
we'll gather around the fire.
Uncle
roast
Walt,
some marshmallows.
Uncle Walt has a story for you, kiddies.
So strap in. I'm going to have a little bit of a story. So I'm going to take us back to 1933 in Rzeszów, Poland.
Okay. That's a treacherous time to be in Poland.
It's true. Look, mostly we're just there. We're just going to take a brief trip just to see the birth of Jerzy Grotowski.
Sure. Who's this guy?
This guy, so he was born in 1933 in Poland. He actually lived most of his life, I think, not in Poland. I can't remember exactly where, I'm sorry. But he was known for this style of theatre that he started to experiment with in the early 1960s. So at this point, he's sort of 30, between 30 and 40 kind of thing. And he calls it poor theatre.
Poor as in like monetary poor, or poor as in like, oh, poor Walt?
As in poor, as in like lacking in stuff.
Oh, so like, actively not the rich theatre where everyone's in bedazzled outfits and
Exactly
stuff.
Exactly that. So at the time, around this time in 1930, so obviously film and television is starting to become a form, like not only for news broadcasts and that kind of thing, but there are shows.
In the 1960s this is happening.
Oh, so yes, more close to the 1960s. Yeah, there are films, there is television, there are shows being broadcast on television. The films are, the cinema is a place you can go every couple of weeks and go see some moving images on a screen. Yep. So theater at the time was sort of going through a little bit of experimenting with big sets, lots of lighting, and trying to recreate these perfect sets, but at the same time, don't say perfect sets, like perfect, looking, the kind of classic theater thing of looking in like the invisible fourth wall of a space. Like there are 3 walls of our living room, and you look at it and you go, that's someone's living room. Like there's a kitchen counter, there's tables,
and
we're
just
chairs.
watching we're like peeping through a peephole at this living room.
We're a fly on the wall of the living room. So that was sort of the style that was really popular at the time. But at the same time as this, you have television and film, which are getting really good at exactly that, right? Like film and television are very good at this because you can film in a house. You can film in a television studio, and you can recreate everything so it looks perfectly lit and perfectly real.
Sure.
So Grotowski thought, and this is a feeling that I agree with in 2024 as well, that theatre was kind of wasting its time trying to compete with these things that clearly television and film would always do better than a theatre show.
In 2024, you're right. I think it's gotten even worse for Grotowski. For example, we've now got CGI.
Yes.
Theatre can't do live CGI.
No, it absolutely cannot. People try, and there's really cool, innovative things people do with technology in theatre, but in terms of realism, like creating a real-looking place, you can never compete with a camera, right? A camera captures everything, and, you can't really, unless you're in a very small theatre, be 5 inches from an actor's face.
You can't see the twitches in their eye.
No, that's not something you'll ever get in a theatre, especially not in the large theatres that are really popular. So what was theatre then? What were we left with to Grotowski? Well, he noted that you can make theatre without a set. You can make theatre without complex lights, without costumes, and without props. All these things can be true, and you can still have theatre because theatre can't exist without an actor, the audience, and the space.
Sure. So it's like Grotowski, and I've seen you perform in lots of shows like this, where it's like empty space, very plain clothing, and like a spotlight and you on stage, and that's pretty much it.
And that's it. And this is basically it's very popular these days for theatre to be made this way. At the time, this was pretty revolutionary. Everyone was looking for realism, and the most popular, we'll go into it in a second, the most popular style of acting was looking for the most realistic way to do something.
Sure.
Grotowski went, well, actually, I think we can do this poor theatre thing where we strip away all these things, which to him were kind of distractions away from what theatre really was, which was an actor, a space, and the audience, ultimately.
Sure. Sounds like that there was... because I imagine that theatre started there somewhere because it would have had to, where you have all these foundations that are being built upon, and then over time, it got needlessly complicated. And he was like, let's strip it back.
Exactly.
And so that was revolutionary at the time.
Yes. Well, I guess in that sense, it's not revolutionary because he's just going, what if we went back to how we clearly started?
What if we went back to the early 1200 BC?
Yeah, exactly right. But yes, it was not something people were focusing on, I guess.
Sure.
People were looking for realism in the theatre, and so this was a new way of approaching theatre, of going, actually, we can focus on the stuff that only theatre can do.
Sure.
So there were many aspects to poor theatre, and I won't go into all of them because I want to hone in on specifically, he had approaches that he gave to his actors, because he was directing theatre shows as he's developing this method, right? Very well received and interesting theatre shows. And there were things that he was teaching to the actors as their way into this style of performance. And it basically, in the same way that he was stripping away all these extraneous elements of the set and the costumes and that kind of thing, he was doing the same thing to his actors. Oh. So this is actually where we get the term via negativa. So we're finally there, 13 minutes in. But yeah, this was basically one of the most crucial aspects of his acting teaching method.
Sure.
So at the time, speaking of method, the prevailing theories around acting, the very popular ones, were based on Stanislavski's method. with a capital M, and this is actually where we get the term method actor.
There's lots of actors that famously talk about the fact that they method act. This is where they like fully embody a character and do not break character for as long as possible to get as real of a portrayal of that character on camera or on stage as they possibly can.
Well, that and the way into that style is actually going and watching a bunch of real things happen. You know, if you need to fall off a bicycle on stage, you should go and ride your bicycle around a lot until you can feel what it's like to be on a bicycle and what it's like to fall off a bicycle.
Do the thing.
Do the
real
thing that you would need to portray.
Yeah, if you're portraying a boxer, go train in a boxing gym.
Yeah, exactly right. So Stanislavski was a Russian guy, but one of his students, Lee Strasberg, moved to America and eventually founded extremely prestigious acting schools in both New York and LA. And this is why, especially with American like Hollywood style performance, we hear a lot about that he's using the method and stuff.
Sure.
And if you mention Stanislavski to any Hollywood actor, they'll go like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, like 100%."
That's what I do.
That's what I do. That's what I'm aiming for. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them are like, "This is a really important thing."
Sure.
So yeah, again, the way to portray something is, if you're going to play a teacher in a film, go teach a while. If you're going to be a doctor, go watch a bunch of doctors operate on somebody. The goal was to be extremely realistic to true life events that you have observed.
To get that actor's emotions aligned with what they have to portray on stage.
Yeah. So this happens a lot in theatre. People set people up as though they're antagonistic towards one another. So Grotowski is usually brought up as opposite to Stanislavski.
Oh, like the fighting ideals.
Yes.
Yeah.
The reality almost always in theatre is Grotowski was a massive fan of Stanislavski. He learned from Stanislavski, thought he was a brilliant director. Even towards the end of his life, was like Stanislavski was the first person to really articulate what a method of approaching acting could look like. He's amazing. He's a revolutionary. Like, he was a huge fan, but he disagreed with Stanislavski.
So he was like, "Oh my God, the work he did was incredible, but I want to do this."
Yes, exactly right. So the pretty hefty thing that he disagreed on was basically this thing of that actors should learn to perform by observing real things and trying to emulate them. So Grotowski instead argued that the actor is better served by getting rid of tricks, he basically calls them, which are I know the trick of falling off a bicycle. I know
cruxes.
These kind of little things that I know the skills of, but they're very narrow skills, right? Like, I know how to fall off a bike, but now if I have to climb a mountain, I have to go watch someone climb a mountain. Like, it's sort of like we're just like adding more and more of these little individual skills when we should be focusing on the whole. So his goal was, and I'll quote, "to eliminate from the creative process the resistances and obstacles caused by one's own organism, both physical and psychic, the two forming a whole." So in other words, there are a bunch of cunning tricks that an actor can employ to convey emotions and actions to the audience, but these won't necessarily be true, right?
Right.
They won't be true to the actor as a person in a space when they're falling off their bicycle.
They know that they planned to fall off that bicycle and they trained to fall off that bicycle.
Yeah, and that's
because they watched a bunch of people fall off
exactly
a bike.
Right. So the trick that they're employing here is kind of just a trick. And so you can build an audience based on all these tricks, but you won't necessarily be creating a true and honest portrayal of someone, a person in a room, right?
Sure, okay.
So basically the best actor will be the one who can give themselves completely over to the moment and act truthfully. And the best way to reach this state for Grotowski was to eliminate the tricks and habits that allow an actor to conceal themselves. And this included, by the way, like at the actor as a person. Like Grotowski would look at an actor when they're just talking, like as me, Walt, the actor.
And try and remove Walt.
Yeah, well, and be like, you have concealed yourself behind these facsimiles.
Oh, so you are playing Walt.
You are playing a bit of a role here. And you as a person have tricks. When you try to convey something, you move your hands in this way.
It's fucking deep, man.
It's a really, a very raw and personal thing that he's aiming for, which is to basically just strip away all of these layers.
And get back to the most purest form of like, kind of almost like an innocence, right? It's like this like absolute innocence of a human.
Absolutely right. So the main thing he's looking for is exactly that, is what a child has when they are born, which is there's no gap in a child between an internal impulse to do something and the action of doing it. The action of doing the thing that they want to do, right?
They want to grab onto the mother's hand.
Yeah, so they do it.
They think as they're doing it because it's just pure impulse.
Yeah, and so, a small child, if they feel like dancing, will just get up and dance, right? They don't have this kind of layer that we develop, and some of us get very thick layers of levels of going, I shouldn't do that. I'm in this kind of situation. I should act in this way. I should portray myself in this way.
I mean, we literally say we should act in a certain way when we're at certain events.
Yeah.
Act... Yeah, okay, I'm with you. This is interesting. Yeah, you're going.
So I've got another quote here, which is, Grotowski wanted to achieve a freedom from the time lapse between inner impulse and outer reaction so that impulse and action are concurrent. So this is exactly what we're just saying, right? If I get the urge to act in this way, I'll just do it. I'll just instantly do it because I won't have these layers that are stopping me from doing that.
I can see why you're so passionate about this. I've watched you do improv a lot.
Yes, well, improv is a lot of this, right? You can't. You don't have the time to not have the thing. And a lot of improv actually is about teaching you to trust your inner impulses. Like when you get the impulse to do something, that was because you felt that the audience were ready to receive a new thing that you were getting the impulse for.
Makes sense.
So basically, rather than getting the emotional impetus from within that tells you how you should react and having your mind reinterpret that into a suitable gesture, just receive an impulse and instantly portray it. He wanted actors who were responsive, active, and alive to the individual moments within the play, so that, when someone talks to you, you're not thinking, I've got this line, then I'm going to move in this way. You trust enough of your own skills and your knowledge of the text that when you're on the stage and someone's talking to you, you're just talking. You just talk to this person as you in that moment, and you'll just be truthful and honest because you're you.
Yeah, it's wild. It's you can almost see where like Stanislavski's inspiration came from, because it's like he's wanting the actor to embody and like be the thing, but the method that he's going about it is completely different. Whereas Stanislavski was like building on all of these tricks and these gimmicks and these like ways of like, going and observing or going and training in a boxing gym. This is stripping back everything so that way the human you're left with just does the thing. Yeah.
This is the funny thing with theatre, is that the reason all of these practitioners ultimately just end up respecting one another is pretty much everyone has a very similar goal when they make theatre, which is you want to believe it, right?
You want the actors to tell the story in a way that makes you go, yeah, that's happening.
Yeah, I believe that this is how this person is feeling right now. And so people have their own ways into it, and probably the way people differ the most is how that should be portrayed on the stage. So like, for instance, Stanislavski famously did a play that was set near a wetland, and in one of his rehearsals, the writer came in, Chekhov, who was a brilliant Russian writer, and came in and was like, what the hell are you doing? Because all the actors kept on slapping their themselves all
where the
over.
Bugs were.
Because they were like, oh, I've got mosquitoes on me. I'm living near a wetland. And Chekhov was like, stop that. I want to watch the play. I don't want to watch actors slap their arms for an hour and 45 minutes. I want to hear the words that they're saying. So this is kind of where people get caught up. Stanislavski's like, it has to be exactly real. I want everything to feel like a real place. And then you've got other people being like, no, it's more important that I believe the person than that I believe the situation. So
Interesting.
This is kind of where we end up. So how does this play out in rehearsal? One of my acting teachers went and studied with Eugenio Barba, who's an Italian guy who was basically Grotowski's the continuation of Grotowski, because Grotowski died in the 90s. But they worked together for 50 years or something. Eugenio Barba has basically continued to explore the things that Grotowski was exploring in a very similar way.
Sure.
One of my acting teachers had went and studied with Eugenio Barba. So it was a huge admirer of Grotowski. And when we studied Grotowski, she would just speak at length about how important it was to act in this way and all these kinds of things.
So you're 4 points of difference away from...
It's just the reality of the theatre world, honestly, is you're like, that guy taught that person who taught Hugh Jackman. Very strange. Anyway, she used to say, when you'd be doing a scene, she'd go, stop. You're capital A acting.
Right.
So, as in, you are, rather than just let's say I'm really frustrated. You're a character on the stage who has lost something of mine that's really valuable. I'm coming in and I'm going rather than just being angry with you, I'm kind of thinking, what does an angry person look like? I'm throwing my hands in the air. I'm stomping around. I'm yelling in this kind of, I'm so mad at you, James. God, I can't believe you do this.
So what we do at the start of every episode.
Well, but I rather than be angry, I'm portraying anger. Do you know what I mean?
I do get the difference here.
There's kind of a difference. And so she'd go, okay, no, stop. You're capital A acting.
Okay,
you're acting with a capital A. You're acting to me rather than just acting, just performing, just being you and being who you need to be in this space.
Show me that from you.
Yeah, be you angry, not be you pretending to be this person, pretending to be angry. You know what I mean? And yeah, the goal here was basically to get out of the way of yourself as an actor. You have everything you need to be truthful and interesting. You just need to eliminate the tendencies you have as an actor and as a person that lead you to pretend, and instead allow yourself to be who you need to be in each moment. So this is where we get via negativa, right? The via negativa, I think, translates to basically the negative way, or, you know, kind of the elimination way, I guess is how we're interpreting it here, which is the way to get to truth is actually to eliminate the falsehoods.
Okay. I'm with you.
Okay, now, Commander.
Sure. I, for a hot minute, forgot we were a Commander podcast there. So I'm assuming the line you're going down here is we're going to look at deck building.
Yes.
And we're going to look at the cards we're eliminating.
Yes.
I love it. After half an hour,
we're there.
I feel like I can contribute.
We're in Commander. So yeah, basically the way this translates across is, I believe, and I think this is what the Space Commanders are getting at, that the way to build the best Commander deck possible is actually to eliminate the parts that are detracting from the pure experience.
The tricks.
Yeah. A lot of us end up, when we build a deck for the first time, with 130 cards, right? It's pretty common.
Yeah.
You sit down with your deck and you go, oh my God, I've got 30 cards I've got to cut. And it's very hard to get down to 100. So I think this is basically going to help with that. But also, I just think there are so many great Commander cards these days. Like, it's not hard to find a good card for any given deck, but it's much harder as a result to find which cards to cut from your deck.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to even like ignore cards, because there's so many cards that are like, you should include this card in your deck because it's logically the best include in any deck that is white.
Yeah.
Like that new
Trouble in Pairs.
Trouble in Pairs or Final Showdown. It was the white card that I was thinking of.
The Wrath that can also have all creatures lose all abilities.
And gives the creature you control indestructible. Yeah. This new 1-mana white spree card. It's just like,
it's cracked.
I am now looking at every white deck I own like, yeah, I should have that.
Yeah. If you had the means and you just like had the card lying around, you'd probably just put it in every deck.
Yeah, and it's getting harder and harder because every set has these cards.
Yes, you know, Farewell came out last year, and then before that it was Vanquish the Horde, which is the Wrath that can cost white to cast.
Yeah, Blasphemous Act in white.
Yeah.
We didn't need it.
Who would have thunk it? We didn't need it, but we got it. So I think that the really big disclaimer I want to build here is that we don't want to build linear decks, right? We just want decks that are focused and effective. We aren't eliminating everything that makes a deck interesting. Grotowski didn't want to eliminate all the parts of an actor's performance that made it interesting.
Well, because then it would just be a space in the audience.
Yeah, exactly right. He just wanted to cut everything that made it uninteresting, right? Sure. He wanted to cut away the parts of the performance that were taking away from the truth that was there. And in the same way, our goal with these decks as we approach them is to cut away the strategies, cut away the cards that are actually detracting from the experience of this deck so that it is this pure and very interesting thing that's left.
Okay, all right. I'm 100% on board. So we're looking at stripping down the unnecessary bits to get to what the deck's core is. Now, look, we've talked about this on the podcast before, where a deck can have multiple themes or strategies within it.
Yes.
And we've said that can detract from what the deck is really trying to do and basically mean that your deck is like 4 decks, but muddled into one.
Yes, and I think this is exactly the same way that we're cutting away the bad habits of an actor. I think that the bad habit of the deck is that it's trying to do a bunch of different things, and it's like, no, give me this one thing.
Give me the thing. You're a flicker deck.
Yes.
Remember, you are a flicker deck.
Yes.
Be the flicker deck. Embody the flicker deck. Why are you trying to do this graveyard shit? Be the flicker deck.
You're a deck with a capital D, I'm afraid.
You're capital D decking yourself.
Oh my god.
But you're a mill deck, so well done, bravo.
Yes, I completely agree. So this is something we've talked about before. So I think that when we're looking at this, so we've got to cut away a strategy from a deck, or maybe sometimes a couple of them. I think you've got to think about, first off, I think the sort of the steps to this. I think the first step is you need to think about what your main deck strategy is. And this is the thing that you can't eliminate from the deck without it becoming something else. So if you've built an elf deck and then you cut the elf theme from it, it's not an elf deck anymore, right? This is like the main really obvious one, like the Enchantress deck or the Spellslinger.
I would usually say that this is really strongly linked with your commander because you've probably selected that commander specifically because, keep in mind, your commander is... one of the greatest things about this format is that we have an extra card accessible to us at the start of every game.
Yeah.
So we've selected that card specifically to support what our deck's trying to do.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a Aristocrats deck and you've got Teysa Karlov in the command zone, how awesome is it having an Aristocrats deck and without having to find one of the best cards in your deck, it's always accessible to you.
Yeah.
So have a look at your commander when you're thinking about like, oh, what is my deck's actual strategy?
Yeah.
Why did you choose that commander in the first place?
Yes, and that'll tell you a lot about the deck. And so if you've built a Voltron deck, it'll be pretty obvious, right? You'll be playing like Brina, yeah, the something alabaster or whatever. The huge thing that like gets suited up and is like flying.
The Azorius thing that returns a bunch of auras. It's nuts.
Or you'll have something similar that
or like Valduk, the red guy. Yeah, he's a good
one. I've seen people build Wilson. The refined grizzly,
I love Wilson.
Yeah.
2/2 for 2, but it has ward 2, trample, vigilance, reach.
Yeah, all the good stuff. Yeah. All the green stuff, specifically.
All the green stuff, yeah.
So that's your main deck strategy is going to be something like that. Voltron, Aristocrat, something like that. Think of then, the second step, I think, is think of what secondary strategies are already present in the deck. And you'll just like look at the actual cards themselves. So if you're building an Enchantress deck, like this is the main deck strategy, it's an Enchantress deck, you might have an Aura sub-theme. This is going to be pretty common, obviously, right?
Well, like your Enchantress deck is auras.
Yeah.
Because your commander, the Estrid, untaps enchanted permanents. So you want to enchant permanents specifically, like an aura on a land or on a creature. So that way, when you activate your commander, there's synergy there.
Yeah. And so decks like this would love SRAM, for instance. SRAM draws you a card whenever you cast an aura or equipment spell. So if you've got enough auras in the deck, then yes, SRAM is going to be really good as a sort of sub-theme support of that aura sub-theme. Likewise, if you're building Aristocrats, you might have a graveyard sub-theme. If you're built in Voltron, you might have an equipment sub-theme. Like, it'll be pretty clear from your main strategy what kinds of secondary strategies are supported in your colors and stuff.
I think in the future there's almost a whole episode in looking at what strategies are support strategies and what strategies are focus strategies. I think there's something in there because I think that a graveyard strategy is very broad umbrella.
Yes.
You can then be looking at mill. You could be looking at reanimator.
Yeah, you can be an aristocrat.
So I think it's quite a tricky thing to understand. But like we were saying before, really look at your commander. Why did you choose that in the first place?
Yeah.
And how have you built the deck to support what the game plan is?
Yeah, I think looking at these secondary themes, look to the cards themselves a lot as well. Like if looking to your commander defined your primary theme, I think the way you've built the rest of the deck, that'll define a lot of what the secondary themes are. Because you might have an aura theme, and we'll get into this a bit later, and have 10 cards in there, and it's like, well, that's not really a very supported secondary theme.
Yeah.
But if you've got like 30 sort of stacksy kind of enchantments, you might have a stacks sub theme within your Enchantress list. And then the third step is the really important one now, which is you need to pick one, maybe two of these secondary strategies that you're going to keep, and all the others need to go.
Yeah, look, this is a really hard thing to do as a new player, but can be really hard to do as an experienced player because you've built this deck, you've just freshly built it, you've cut down to 100 cards, and now you're going like, wow, this is amazing. Look at all the incredible things that can happen or will possibly happen because I've got all of these themes supporting each other.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, but you have 7 cards in your hand at the start of the game, not all 99 of them. It's really, really challenging to actually say, no, I got to take away this other part of the deck that's not doing anything to support the main strategy. It was a cute idea, but it doesn't have a place here.
Yeah, it's you really got to think about the likelihood that you find multiples of these cards that work really well with each other. If you have some kind of combo, it doesn't have to be infinite, of 2 cards together, if neither of those cards is your commander and you don't run many tutors in the deck, the likelihood that you find 2 specific cards in the 99 of your deck, it's very low.
Yeah.
Very, very low.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be relying on either of those cards always having the other before it's good, right?
I always do a thing of if I'm looking at a card, I'll look at it and go, right, I'm going to draw a random card from this deck. Do these two cards work together? Do they look like they're meant to be in the same deck?
Yeah.
Like, I've done it before where I've, like, had a random card from a deck in my hand, and I'm going, right, shuffle the rest of the deck, draw another random card, see what it is.
Right.
They look like they're from two different decks.
Yeah.
Which of these cards needs to be cut?
That's a good strategy. I didn't know you did that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've done it a few times. I specifically, if there's, like, one card that I'm, like, on the fence about, I will just draw cards from the top of my deck and go, do these two cards look like they belong in the same deck together?
Yeah, I mean, even just going, do these synergize, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have something that says, like, when a creature you control dies, do this thing, and then just, like, keep on drawing until you hit a sack outlet.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, it took me 50 cards to find a sack outlet.
Or, like, for example, I've had, like, a card that says, you know, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, do a thing. And I draw cards from the top of my deck, and it takes me 5, 6, 7 cards to find an instant or sorcery. I'm like,
it shouldn't be like that.
Why have I not got this in the deck?
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that as well in the second half, where I want to look at specifically cards and synergies that you can look. I think this is a lot of that kind of thing. But yeah, in terms of themes, I've got some examples from my decks. I always have at least one like really bold theme I'm trying to make work in one of my decks, and it's just I'm stretching, and I don't realize I'm stretching until I cut it and go, oh, the rest of the deck works now.
Oh, this was actually a really good deck if I wasn't trying to do this other thing as well.
Straight up. So, like, for example, in my Kaza Wizards deck, when I first built it, so Kaza is a 2-mana wizard that taps to reduce the cost of the next instant or sorcery spell you cast by X, where X is the number of wizards you control. So if you've got 5 wizards, tap Kaza, the next spell costs 5 less. So it makes sense. It's a wizards deck, I would say, is the main theme.
Typal.
Secondary theme is a pretty clear big spells.
Yeah,
right?
You're reducing the cost of a massive spell with Kaza to get as much advantage as you can.
Yeah, X spells are really good here, for instance. You know, draw X cards is great.
Deal X damage, even better.
Also works really well. However, I really thought that I noticed a lot of wizards have ETBs, and I found this awesome card, Naban, Dean of Iteration. It's basically Panharmonicon just for wizards.
I remember you buying this card, and I remember warning you about this card. I specifically remember being like, oh, well, yeah, no, you're right. There is a lot of ETBs in this deck. How many of them are there that are always going to pay off
as well,
and that are always going to pay off with this? Your commander doesn't have one.
Nope. Yeah, look, the answer was basically not enough. So I ended up keeping, the thing is, like, because I was so adamant about having this be a sub-theme in the deck, I kept a bunch of wizards and enhancers that did nothing for the deck unless Naban was on the battlefield. Like, I kept wizards that didn't really synergize with the rest of my deck, but had an ETB.
Because you wanted them to synergize with
Yep,
Naban.
I wanted them to ETB twice. I had, like, cards that,
Is Naban a legendary?
Naban is legendary.
Just build a Naban deck, you
I know.
idiot.
It's mono blue is the problem, so you lose access to red. But look, I basically, the long and the short of it is I was like, okay, if I cut Naban, I can also cut these like 5 bad, terrible, awful cards that don't work with him whatsoever, and I will end up with a stronger and more synergized deck as a result.
I think this is why we see a lot of precons be a lot weaker than a lot of casual decks that people are playing at tables, is because precons are designed in such a way by R&D that they have a secondary commander in the deck that is doing a similar thing to what the deck is trying to do, but it's like taking you down a different path.
Yeah.
But it's in the same deck, so therefore you have to include cards that synergize with that commander in case the player wants to switch them out.
Yeah.
This is why you'll see a lot of precon upgrade videos that just go, take out the alternate commander.
Yeah.
It's not doing enough.
And these 10 cards that don't support your main commander.
Yes.
Yeah. And look, I think in in R&D's defense, I can see the appeal from their perspective of going...
as a product. Yeah.
Because then if someone fires a secondary commander, like they basically throwing 2 darts at the commander and going...
One will stick.
Catch one!
Why would they be darts and catching? Why are you throwing a dart for someone to catch? You do not play sport.
They're capital D darts. So... No.
I get what you're saying, though. Like, as a product, it makes a lot of sense because, like, R&D are trying to create something that makes people want to play the game and build and brew and all that kind of stuff.
Like, and someone might see that secondary commander and go, I love this. I'm not interested in the main theme. They might cut the main theme from the deck and go for this new thing. I'll be left with
this commander and the 10 cards that synergize with it, and I'll build the rest.
And I'll build a deck around that. And there's, like, an appeal in that for sure.
For sure.
I have one more example just because I love, I don't know, am I a masochist? It just seems like every episode I'm just like, here's how stupid I am.
Everyone in the comments, tell Walt how shit of a deck builder he is. He'll
I
go
love
home
it.
and read them all and
I
go,
love it.
oh yeah, I am really bad at deck building. This has gone so far.
What's your
other example,
I said
Walt?
the word masochist. It's my fault. Arami of the Dead Tide is
yeah.
my blue-black sort of reanimated deck, right? This is the one Arami taps, another tap thing, to encore
Encores,
creatures,
yeah.
right? Yeah, brings them back from the graveyard. So it cares about big enter the battlefield effects, big leave the battlefield effects, dies effects, this kind of thing. Has a big mill sub-theme because you need to mill yourself a lot.
You're playing Milliken, you're playing...
definitely,
all
but
those
also
cards.
some ways to mill other people. So I can... Because there's a couple of graveyard theft cards like Sepulchral Primordial, Diluvian Primordial. Primordials are cool, I like them.
They're really good in Arami because you get 3 of them.
Yes, yeah, nicking 3 spells out of each opponent's graveyard. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So, however, I ended up with a bunch of untappers in the deck because I was like, oh, Arami's great once a turn, but what if I use her twice a turn?
Oh, yeah. No, I remember you had quite a... Did you have Kelpie Guide in there at one point?
No, not Kelpie Guide, but there were definitely like 5, maybe 6 different like creatures that
You
tapped
definitely
to
had
untap.
Twiddle in the main
I think
book.
Twiddle's still in
Still
there.
in there?
I killed my good friend Cooper with Twiddle, and it's become a meme, and I can't cut Twiddle
died
from
to
the deck.
Twiddle.
Yeah, it's too funny. But yeah, basically, I was like, oh, I can activate Arami multiple times. The problem is, you need to exile 3 cards from your yard to activate Arami. So you need quite a lot of cards in your graveyard to activate it once, let alone twice.
Yeah,
right?
and you still need to pay the mana value of the card.
You still need to pay the mana value.
Yeah.
That's the other big one. Is it's like if you have your Grey Merchant of Asphodel in the bin.
That's 5.
That's
CMC.
5 mana. You normally want to cast another spell of some kind before you encore something. You've got some sort of support piece, or you want to give something hexproof or haste. And so, yeah, like the amount of time that you have enough mana and enough cards in your graveyard to activate Arami multiple times is very small.
And also, like, Sepulchral Primordial, 6 mana.
Yeah.
When are you going to have 12 mana in Dimir?
Yeah,
Like-
exactly right. So I basically ended up... There are still 2, maybe 3 or 4 cards that untap, because it still can be good in a long game, but they're mostly untappers that do other stuff. So, for instance, I have... I forget the name of it. There's that artifact that says you can activate abilities of creatures as though they had haste, and you also pay 1 and tap it, and you can untap a creature.
I remember
forget
this
what
card
it's
as well.
called.
Yeah,
You know the one I'm talking about there, right?
It's- it doesn't give the creature haste, but it gives activated abilities haste.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is exactly what you need in Arami,
Yeah.
right?
You don't
So
want to attack with Arami, you just want to tap it.
No,
Yeah.
not one time. So yeah, I hope you're getting the picture here from me being a masochist, which is that yes, the when I had these secondary themes in the deck, they were warping the deck in a way that was actually detracting away from the main experience of
Yeah,
playing.
and it's really hard because at the deck building process, you were like, this makes a lot of sense to be
Yeah.
able to untap Arami or to have an ETB doubler in my Kaza deck because the deck has all of these things that can happen.
Yeah.
And in Magical Christmas Land, it's great, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
If it works, it blows up and it
Totally.
plans out the way it did in your head. But
Yeah.
when you're thinking about what the deck's overall trying to do, it's slowing it down. And as a result, I mean, look at the last 2 examples given by the masochist. It got better for Walt.
Yes.
Like it genuinely, like your decks have now improved as a result of removing these sub themes.
100%. The thing you got to keep in mind is when you're supporting these unnecessary sub-themes, every one of these cards in that unnecessary sub-theme is a card that could be supporting your main theme or your main secondary theme.
This is the thing. We've got 100 cards and only 100 cards.
Yeah.
So we want every card in there to actually be doing something we want to do in that moment on the turn where it's in
Definitely.
your hand. We've a good friend of ours, Jordan, plays a really, really clever game with himself when he's tinkering with decks. He will put in the card sleeve a slip of paper
I
to
love
say
this.
he's considering a different card.
I
at
found
the
out that
time.
JLK does this as well.
Does he really?
In the goldfishing episode they did recently on the Command Zone, he said he does exactly this. And I was like,
there you go.
Yeah.
Like, this is a top tier thing to be doing while you're brewing and like tinkering with decks.
Yeah.
Is put a slip of paper in a card that you're considering is maybe too off theme or like
Yeah.
supporting your third theme.
So let's say if it's my Arami deck and I've got a Muldrifter in the deck, but I'm considering maybe playing a Twiddle instead. I might have the Muldrifter in the sleeve and then have a slip of paper that says Twiddle in the Muldrifter sleeve. So when I draw Muldrifter, I look at it and go, do I want Muldrifter here or would I really rather have Twiddle?
Yeah, how good would Twiddle be right now? It's not that good, but Muldrifter has always been good for me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play Muldrifter out. Like,
Yeah.
have a think about doing that with a couple of your decks if you feel like you're always running into multiple themes.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge thing. We've been talking for a while. I reckon it might be time for a thrifty interlude.
A thrifty interlude, just like the start of this episode where I didn't do anything and just listened to Walt tell a story about theatre.
Sometimes you do the interlude. Sometimes you do.
That's true. But we're going to take a little bit of a break to watch some theatre or listen to some theatre.
Yes.
I get to watch it. Yeah. I get to sit here and watch him do this.
Someday, maybe you'll get to watch it as well. So we're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. And as is tradition, I will be performing. And this week, the card is brought to life in monologue form from the perspective of someone in the card. James, do you want to read the card we're featuring this week?
I'm assuming we're going to be hearing from the scholarship sponsor.
That's right.
Because that's the name of the card. For 3 and a white, you'll get a creature human advisor. That's a 3/3. And when it enters the battlefield, each player who controls fewer lands than the player who controls the most lands searches their library for a number of basic lands less than or equal to the difference. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle.
I sponsored tons of them, yeah. Like 40 or something? I don't know. Haven't counted in a while. Yeah, I'm just really nice, I guess. I like sort of checking in with them. Like I'll have a little Zoom call with them once a month and see how they're going. They're always so grateful, you know. That's what I love about it. They just say, thank you so much. And you really feel like you're making a difference and you're important in the world with what you're doing. Some of them are like, oh, I can't call you today. Sorry, Carol. I've got to study, you know. Like, I want to do really well with my scholarship. And I'm like, that's fine. But, like, if they do that a couple of times, they get axed, you know. Yeah, I have them killed with an axe. They'd probably die if I wasn't paying their bills anyway. So what's the difference? Get budgeted!
For the context of the listeners, that was a one-take wonder. And I
took a very silly gulp of tea as I began.
I literally recoiled my head back to finish the tea without spitting it all over Walt and had to face the other wall. Fuck, I wasn't ready for that, man. That was funny. Why? I'm not even going to ask. No, I'm just going to enjoy it.
There's no need to know. You can, if you enjoyed that, you can see those scripts, I'm going to call them.
Yeah.
Every Thursday in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server. It's the Thrifty Thursdays channel. And it's also where we hang out with our playgroup. It's a cool place to chat to me and James and judges and all sorts of lovely things.
And find out about really cheap new white ramp cards.
Yeah.
Oh, talk about, like, people really piss on white, like can't ramp, and Smothering Tide is the only real card that does
Rubbish. It's gotten so good at it now. So good. There's been so many good treasure makers recently. So many of these, like, you get lands if other people have more lands than you effects.
Archaeomancer's map.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a bunch in the past couple of years.
People always whinge about white ramp, and it's like, but blue and black also don't do anything.
Yeah.
Except for rocks.
It's just the players that do that also play Mana Crypt and Mana Vault and Mox Opal. It's like,
you can play them in white too. Yeah. Anyway, we should
white
cut
players
some...
have more, what do you call it, ethics.
It should be fair. I should do no more than anybody else.
I think balance should be unbanned. Moving on.
Yep, love it. So we looked at cutting. We looked at cutting some strategies from our decks. I want to look at cutting. This is sort of similar to strategies, but cutting unsupported synergies. So
I feel like this is getting more. I see where you're going with this because this is getting more specific now.
Yes.
This is like we were talking about like overarching themes, and then we were referencing cards kind of generally. I think we should look at very specific synergies between two. Maybe we'll even use a few examples.
Definitely. So you can think of this, if we're going to bring it back to Grotowski's method again, you can think of this all the actors' gestures that they make that sort of distract away from what they needed to convey to an audience. If you've ever seen an amateur theatre production and you can't get over the fact that someone keeps on moving their hands around a bunch, and you're like, I'm trying to listen, and I'm literally just like watching the way their hands move everywhere. That's what we're talking about. We're going to cut the hand movement.
Stop flapping your hands about and remove that card from your deck.
Exactly.
This is a very typical Get Commanded episode of like, we're talking about acting and Magic the Gathering.
At the same time. Both things can be true. So there are going to be cards in your deck, pieces in your deck that care a lot about how many other cards in your deck they specifically synergize with. We kind of alluded to this already before, but like, a lot of these are like enhancers, for example, is a good example.
Well, I was thinking of referencing enhancers specifically because like in our deck building template, we only say you should have about 3 to 5 of these.
Yeah.
Like we really like really strip it back, and if anything, try and reduce them, because these are cards that, like, say, like the card we use all the time to like show as an example is Panharmonicon, right?
Yeah.
It's a card that doubles ETB triggers. Oh my god, if you've got a lot of ETB triggers in your deck, this is fantastic. However, if you're hellbent and you draw this card,
it does nothing.
It literally does nothing. It's a 4-mana artifact that says it might do something later.
Yeah,
and
possibly.
That's not what we want in all of our cards.
No.
But also, we want to make sure that that is supporting all of our cards, or as many as we can get.
Yeah, or is supported by all the other cards as well. Yeah. I think a lot of enhancers will look like this. I mean, every doubling effect is an enhancer, right? Like Teferi's Ageless Insight doubles card draw.
Yep.
Any double damage kind of effect will do this. Doubling attack triggers is a thing we've got now with, what's it, on a combat damage triggers, what's 5 Boots Phil or whatever his fucking name is?
5 Boots Phil?
It's not 5 Boots Phil.
Big Uzi boy.
5 Boots Felix, I think it actually might be. Anyway.
So you're actually pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, like any like stuff that says like copy activated triggered ability or like stuff like that. They're all
this stuff
enhancers.
is enhancers. So you really need to know how many cards in your deck they enhance. And likewise, like there are cards that just generally synergize that aren't even enhancers like this. Like if you're playing Archmage Emeritus, this is the one that says Magecraft. So whenever you copy or cast an instant or sorcery card, draw a card. So it's a great card draw piece that we spoke about only a couple of episodes ago when we spoke about card draw. But how many instants and sorceries are in your deck?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're a spell slinger deck and you have maybe like 25, 30, 35 instants and sorceries, you can justify putting a creature in your deck if it's this creature that says every time you do anything else in your deck.
Yeah, all the things your deck wants to do and it is doing.
Get a bit of extra value, draw a card.
Worth it.
Amazing.
Absolutely
so
worth it. But likewise, if you had 15 instants and sorceries in your deck, how much of the time is Archmage Emeritus sitting there doing nothing? And by the way, people remove Archmage Emeritus.
It's a lightning bolt for removal.
Definitely.
In the same kind of category, you can look at cards like Impact Tremors. Now, this could be considered not an enhancer. That's why I kind of want to use it as an example. It's like Impact Tremors is a card that if you are already making a lot of bodies and maybe having, or just your deck is full of creatures in general, this card is a great include. However, if you don't have a bunch of creatures, but you're still casting things like, what's the Krenko's Command, that kind of stuff, making
2
bodies,
tokens,
then this card is still great. How many of your cards make bodies, and how many make multiple bodies?
Yeah, you want to be going very wide with Impact Tremors. Like, yes, theoretically, every creature ETBs and deals damage around the table. That's pretty good. But if you're a Dragons deck, there are a bunch of dragon effects that care about very big creatures ETBing and what they will do to a board.
Which is much better for your deck than Impact Tremors.
Yeah.
So, like, we're looking at cards like, you know, okay, if we're running Impact Tremors and we're running Mere Battlesphere, we love that because that's one spell that triggers it 5 times.
Yeah.
Let's look at another card like, Walt, give me a bunch of token makers in white. Captain of the Watch?
Captain of the Watch
does it.
Yep, 6-mana creature, ETBs makes 3 soldiers, so that would be 4.
Even like some, the Krenko's Command style effects where it's just an instant that makes 3 bodies.
And certainly if your commander makes tokens every turn, like, you know, a Fabine deck, for instance, is the 6-mana creature that either pumps creatures or makes tokens depending on what people flip off the top with what's it called, Parlay. But that is going to make you between 1 probably and 4 tokens pretty much every single turn.
Or Phylath.
Phylath is a great place to play Impact Tremors.
Would you believe I don't run Impact Tremors in my Phylath deck?
Really?
Because I think it's too good.
I don't think you need it either.
It's too good. I prefer to run Goblin Bombardment as like that slot.
Well, you also fling stuff. Phylath is interesting because you go wide and tall.
It's a bizarre deck.
It's a very strange deck. It's very good. Your Phylath deck is one of your best ones for sure.
I wanted to play it the other night at Commander Night, and
we said no.
No, I want to have a chance at winning.
There's a few of your decks that I personally have lost to so many times. Phylath is one of them, and so is now lately Savine.
Yeah, for
I've
sure.
seen a lot of Savine games that you've won. But yeah, you know, you can look at even at landfall. Like Rampaging Baloth obviously is an outstanding card. Landfall,
amazing
make a 4/4
landfall
beast.
trigger.
But you need to be a deck that is playing multiple lands every turn. Yes, making a 4/4 every turn is pretty good, but like you're paying 6 mana and Rampaging Baloth gets blown up very quickly.
Yeah.
Like, you need to think about the likelihood that on the turn you play Rampaging Baloth, you can have multiple lands lands enter the battlefield.
Yeah, so for example, if you're in a deck that's playing Rampaging Balos and you're not already playing Azusa, Lost But Seeking.
Yeah, or Mina and Den.
Or maybe something like Raminap Excavator or Crucible of Worlds to recur lands
from bin, especially if you got a
Fetch
Evolving
lands.
Wilds fetch land kind of thing in your bin. Yep.
If you're not already playing those cards and you're looking at playing Rampaging Balos, ask yourself why. Why are you actually putting that in your deck?
Yes, definitely. I think it's the kind of thing where a lot of people look at their deck and go, but my deck will be playing a land every turn. Like, I can support, like, land stuff. Like, I'll be playing lands, and, like, I've got my ramp spells. Like, I've got a Farseek in this deck, and I've got a Cultivate and stuff. And it's like, yes, but these cards are so much better when they're very supported. So this is what we're talking about. Like, when we're talking about cutting synergies from your deck, we're not saying cut, your Rampaging Balos from your 40 land, 20 ramp spell deck. No, absolutely not. It belongs there. It's your primary theme. It should stay there. But yes, in your deck that just happens, like, I've seen people put Rampaging Balos in their Gates decks, for instance. And it's like, yes, these are decks that are pretty good at finding lands and playing them, but how many are you really playing on average per turn? Because I think you have to be averaging 2 to 3 landfall per turn, really, before Rampaging Balos becomes like an auto-include.
If my Fire Life deck doesn't hit 2 landfall triggers a turn, it's a bad turn.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm also thinking of people that look at these cards and go, oh, I've got token synergies. So Rampaging Balos makes big tokens. Yeah, but you're in the token strategy.
Yeah.
Are you going to be spending 6 mana to make a 4/4, or would you rather spend 6 mana to make 5 1/1s immediately, or an overrun effect?
Yeah, this comes back again to the primary secondary theme thing of going like, okay, if you're building a token deck, your primary theme is going wide, right? You want lots of creatures. Your secondary theme, I would say, usually in a token deck is small creatures, like things that trigger when creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield.
Running things like Welcoming Vampire, Mentor of the Meek, those kinds of cards.
Or even stuff like Ginny Fae, when you make tokens instead, make 3/1s. Stuff like that becomes really good. But then it's like, okay, well then if your secondary theme is lands, then it's like, I think if I was looking at a token deck and I was looking at, okay, either I can support my going wide strategy really, really well with small creatures, or I can support my token strategy with landfall, I'd always go for going wide, right? Like, you got to just think about what's more supported. And it's not to say you can't build a deck that's not that way, but think about the number of cards that are supporting the strategies that you're going for in your deck. And
100%.
As always, we mention it all the time, but the magic number is, I think, 25 to 30, right? When cards that, quote, do the thing. You really need to have a very high percentage of your deck synergize with cards, especially like these that cost a lot of mana before it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, look, we gush about Moxfield all the time, but use the Moxfield tags, and you can even say, this is a card that supports my deck strategy, and tag it as the thing.
Yeah.
And then when you sort by tags, all of your card draw is still organized into a pile.
Yeah.
But if your card draw also supports the thing, that's going to get you closer to that number 30. And I genuinely, like 25, yeah, cool. I'm always looking for like 30 up.
30 and above is really where you want to be.
And it's like literally, if you can get it to be half of your deck, to like 45 cards. Well, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, 35 to 40 cards in your deck are lands. So if you are at 30 and you've got 40 lands in your deck, that's half of your non-land cards that are synergizing. That means half the cards you draw that aren't lands will synergize with your thing. That's exactly where you want to be, I think.
Your deck's doing the thing.
Yeah. I would also like to definitely point out, because I know when we did a deck building stream semi-recently, I used this feature of Moxfield, and I had about 4 people in the chat go, what? So I just want to talk about it again.
Is this the highlighter?
Highlighter.
Yeah,
Moxfield has a little button so it's got that panel of buttons across the top.
It looks like a little highlighter.
It's a little highlighter symbol. If you click on that one, it's got a little area where you can basically choose criteria, and it will highlight every card in your deck that fits that criteria.
So you could have highlight human, add creature type human, and it will highlight all the creature types that are human in your deck. Or you could even go further and go Oracle, draw a card.
Yes.
And you will see all the spells in your deck that say draw a card.
Well, it uses Scryfall syntax. So as we know, there's the function draw is a search feature you can use. So you could go function draw, it would tag all that stuff. I think especially when you're looking at cards that do the thing, this is a really great place to go. So for instance, if you're looking at Rampaging Balos and going, how good is this in my deck? I would be going like Oracle text, land. Every single card in your deck that just says land on it. Some of them won't be. It might be a tough search. You might have to filter a little bit more than that.
Or maybe put land onto the battlefield is like an oracle you could look.
Yeah, I would go Oracle Land and Oracle Battlefield.
Yeah,
and that would tell you basically exactly how many ramp spells you have at the very least. I think definitely if there are times where it's a lot easier of a search than that. So for instance, Archmage Emeritus, evaluating how many instants and sorceries in your deck, you can just look at instants and sorceries in Moxfield. But Impact Tremors, for instance, you could go Oracle Text Token.
Yep.
See how many cards in your deck say
Create
token on them.
Yeah.
And that'll be a good indicator of how good a card like Impact Tremors is in that deck. And remember, when we're cutting these synergies from our deck, we are again making room for the cards that will synergize with our primary theme, with our secondary theme.
If you're cutting Rampaging Baloths, think about putting a card that synergizes with your go wide strategy that makes a bunch of tokens on one turn.
Yep.
Maybe there's a green... Oh, Sprout Swarm.
I love Sprout Swarm.
If you're in a tokens build, replace Rampaging Baloth with Sprout Swarm.
Sprout Swarm is maybe one of my favorite cards that has ever been printed.
In the same way that Sphinx of the Second Sun is one of my favorite cards.
I'd say
and
so.
Born Upon a Wind is
I
probably
reckon
my favorite.
they exemplify the way we like to play really well.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which is a good way and silly.
Anyway, Via Negativa. I think the last category I want to look at is cutting cards that are too narrow. You can think of this as Stanislavski's method. Watching people fall off bicycles might help you to fall off a bicycle, but if the scene is about your relationship with your brother who doesn't fall and mocks you for falling off your bicycle, you're missing the forest for the trees.
Okay, I get it. I get what you're saying. It is too slow. I get it. I get it. This is like the... I think this is the magical Christmas land situation, right? This is like the, oh my god, if this, then that, and this, and this.
That's really the thing, right? What do you need to make this card good? If you're saying the words if, then it's probably not worth putting in your deck.
I mean, it's so exciting. There's been so many like convoluted combos that I've had in decks that I've kept in decks for literal years because I've dreamt of the day that I pull it off.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking at them going... It's never going to happen.
Not there.
I need to go train in a boxing gym for this role, for this boxing combo to go off.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unobtainable. I'm not a boxer. Therefore, this deck is not trying to do that combo.
Yeah.
I could make it happen by putting all the tutors and all that kind of stuff in, but then I lose what the deck was originally about in the first place.
It's the diluting of the deck. And I do think that these cards, it's similar to when we talked about the cutting strategies thing. Like when I talked about the ETBs that I was trying to make work in my Wizards deck, like it was diluting the rest of the deck because I was like, in order for this to happen, I need to have this card.
Let me cut a big X spell so I can fit this card in there.
And it's like, no, you just have the X spell in there. And like there'll be a lot of, I'm going to say a lot of high mana value cards in this category of being very narrow. If something costs over 5 mana, especially, I think it needs to have a big impact on the game as soon as you cast it. And that usually requires like either that it's like a absolutely gas sort of removal spell that will leave your board completely intact. I'm talking about like, what's the 6 mana? Choose artifacts or enchantments or mana value 3 or less creatures.
Austere Command. There we go. We got there together.
Austere Command is a 6 mana wrath, which is slightly more than you normally cast. But there's times when you cast an Austere Command and go, cool, I've wrathed everyone else except me.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's worth it, But otherwise, cards really need to they need to punch. They need to synergize with either like your main theme or like a big chunk of your deck or your commander.
I mean, let's look at Rampaging Baloths again with this lens.
Yeah.
If you're in a landfall deck and you're spending 6 mana to get that Rampaging Baloths, but you have ready to go a fetch land, Azusa, and Crucible of Worlds.
It's not narrow.
You're cooking with gas, son.
Yeah.
Like, that is not a narrow thing. And you're going to... That 6 mana is going to be so much more value than what the 6 mana got you originally. Because, like, realistically, Rampaging Baloths is a 6/6 for 6. However, you make it better by making it better by like having those landfall triggers. And like in the same vein, like there are cards in... I'm thinking about my Tornos list at the moment for some reason.
Sure.
The cards that have like really amazing activated abilities on them, but cost a lot of mana.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Mindslaver specifically.
Sure.
In Commander,
6 mana
artifact
costs 4 to activate, and you tap it and sacrifice it.
And then you take control of someone's next turn.
Yeah.
That is a lot of mana to invest. However, my deck for 2 extra mana can do that thing again to someone else.
Yeah, you can take half the turns at the table. Three quarters.
Three quarters if you include your own.
own.
Yeah, exactly. So like this is these cards that I'm thinking about in Tornos are all of those cards that like if you were to play this in another deck, it wouldn't be that good. But
there are a lot of decks where Mindslaver is bad.
Yes,
very
and to be
bad.
honest, in general, in Commander, Mindslaver's a bit shit. Like it genuinely, like you're taking one extra person's turn.
Yeah, you need to be able to either
immediately people are going to try and kill you.
Yeah, either you need to be able to loop it so nobody ever gets a turn, in which case the game is over.
Yep.
Or you need to be able to copy the ability, or like sacrifice it multiple times. Like in some way, make it grander than what's actually going to occur when you just activate it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about stuff like even like Meteor Golem in that deck is a removal spell. 7 mana to destroy a permanent. Poopy. Like, don't actually play that in any other deck unless you are in a deck that cares about ETBs, can copy the effect.
Or in your case, copy the ability.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that when I'm thinking about like these cards that are like really, really good that actually do what we're saying that they need to do, I'm thinking about those high CMC cards.
Definitely. I mean, I've got my Gandalf deck, and there are 2 7-drops in the deck, which is Mere Battlesphere.
Yep.
And the new one that makes, what's it called, Gnomes. Both of them ETB and make, Mere Battlesphere makes 4 Mere. The Gnome thing makes 3 Gnomes, and then when it attacks, it makes 3 more. Gandalf doubles the ETB. So just on their own, if I'm just paying 7 mana and all I have is Gandalf and I'm casting a Mere Battlesphere, I'm making 8 Mere, and whenever I attack, the Mere will deal 8 damage to the defending player, and the Mere Battlesphere is 14? 8?
Well, it gets plus
If
8
you get plus 8. What's it
so
normally? It's a 4/7, I think. So it's going to be
4 plus
14.
8.
Oh my god, maths. Wait,
No, 4 plus 8
no,
is
12. I'm a liar. It's going to be 12, but it's going to deal 12 to the defending player, and then they have to block a 12/12.
That's unbelievable.
For the amount of mana I'm paying, and all I have to have in order for it to be good is my commander.
Yeah,
that's enough.
But again, if you're in a deck where you're like, oh, Mere Battlesphere is great, if I have my Panharmonicon that's also in my deck, and I also have the copy attack trigger thing,
and I need something to give it haste as well.
It's like, if this and this and this, then it's too narrow. And I think that a lot of people get excited, especially when they're like huge mythic rare spells. For example, there was a deluge cycle in the original Commander Legends. Mnemonic Deluge is the one that I'm thinking.
Sure. Yeah.
Exiles an instant or sorcery spell from an opponent's graveyard. You copy it 3 times.
Yeah.
That card is amazing. And there are so many circumstances where you can be like, yes, this card is nuts.
Yeah.
However, it is 9 CMC firstly.
Yeah.
If you do not have the mana to cast it, you're never casting it.
Yep.
Secondly, you need to have access to your opponent's graveyards, and if your opponents haven't milled cards, that card does nothing.
Yeah.
So you need to also be milling cards, and that needs to be as part of your primary strategy to make that card good.
I think in the same way that when we look at 6 and higher mana value and how much impact they need to have, when you get above 7, that card needs to be borderline winning the game.
Yeah.
Borderline winning the game. If not, it needs to be able to be cast a lot cheaper. So, like,
Cheated
for instance,
out,
in my Karza deck, I don't own a copy of Mnemonic Deluge, but blue to do Mnemonic Deluge because it costs 6 less. Yep. That would be pretty sick. If I'm in a copies deck and I'm casting Mnemonic Deluge for 9, but I do it twice,
it's kind of cracked.
That's pretty cracked.
Yep.
But like, if you're just aiming to get to turn 9, cast Mnemonic Deluge, hope there's a good target in an opponent's graveyard, it's not going to be good enough. It's too narrow.
Good, Chief.
It's the percentage of time that it's good is not worth the percentage of time that it sits in your hand.
Yeah, it's same thing with like these big splashy creatures, like the original Sheoldred, for example. This came out at our kitchen table the other night when I cheated it out with Scarab God on turn 5. Amazing card to have on turn 5. Everyone's upkeep, they sack a creature. On my upkeep, I reanimate a creature.
Yeah.
However, if I just played that on curve on turn 8 like it was in any other deck, that's pretty shit.
It's not ideal, especially these days with how much removal we're seeing at most pods. Look, I think, to be honest, speaking of Sheoldred, I do think that upkeep triggers in general tend to be very hopeful and very narrow cards.
Hoping that they'll stick around for longer than they will.
Yeah. Felidar Sovereign and Revel in Riches, these are both upkeep, you win the game triggers, but you have to have Revel in Riches a certain number of treasures. Felidar Sovereign, you have to have more than 50 life, I want to say. Even like
50.
Mycoloth, This is the 5-mana creature that has like Devour. You eat a bunch of things and then you put that many counters on it, or twice that many counters on it. And then in your upkeep, you make that many saplings equal to the number of counters on it. It can be gassed, but the amount of time I've paid 5, eaten like 10 tokens, and then someone removes Michael off. And it's like, not only did this card do nothing for 5 mana, it sacked like half my board.
Yeah. And now someone removed it and it did nothing.
Yeah.
I will point out the elephant in the room that I have been testing and trying to make the 9th Doctor upkeep deck happen.
But this is the same thing again, right?
But
you get multiple upkeeps,
yes,
right?
and I'm abusing those multiple upkeeps, but I will also point out that deck still hasn't won a game.
So even if you're making these upkeep triggers twice as good,
yeah, it's really hard to win because I think one of the problems with these kinds of things is that you're telegraphing that I'm a threat, I'm going to win, but in a turn I'm going to win. So you have a turn to figure it out.
Yeah. In the same way, I think I feel the same way about attack triggers.
Or like the original Atali is one that I think draws a lot of heat.
Definitely.
With this.
But there's a few of these, like even like Drakuseth, the 7-mana dragon that like deals 4 and then 3 to 2 things. Like it does a lot of damage.
Pretty cool.
But it has to attack before it even does that. And it's a 7-mana creature. If you don't have a lot of cards in your deck that are giving haste, I think OG Atali and Drakuseth, I just think
Varagoth as well, the Tudor one.
The Tudor one with Boast.
Yep.
Yeah, like you need to know how much of a threat these represent to the board when you cast them. And if you don't have haste, like people do just answer these cards now, like
or
very
if you're
frequently.
not protecting yourself enough. Like if you don't have enough protection in your deck.
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
also in the same kind of category here. I'm going to put like responses and answers in while we're talking about protection.
Sure.
Because I think that there are some cards that I've been seeing people play that are removal spells. And we talk about how important removal is all the time in this podcast. And I'm glad to see the removal going up and interaction. However, some people are running like really, really narrow removal. And I mean like cards that are like 3 CMC that destroy a creature with flying or destroy only an enchantment.
Oh, like I think the mutation cards, Artifact Mutation and Enchantment Mutation.
Yep.
So these are 2 mana. One of them, Enchantment Mutation's green-white instant. Artifact Mutation's red-green instant. But the Artifact Mutation destroys an artifact. Enchantment Mutation destroys an enchantment. In both cases, you make a number of saplings equal to the mana value of the thing you destroyed. That's sick. Not denying that.
If you're in a token deck, that's pretty cool.
Maybe. But like, I think the cost of one of your removal slots being only an answer for specifically enchantments or
super narrow.
Because keep in mind, both these cards are in green. So like these are competing with Return to Nature, which for 2 mana just destroys an artifact, enchantment, or exiles a card from a graveyard.
Yep.
Like that card's like 20 cents. You can find it anywhere. It's printed every like 2 sets at this point. And that will always answer an artifact or an enchantment on a board at the very least.
Even like, I'm a big fan of Croson Grip, 3 mana, split second, destroy either artifact or enchantment.
Yeah.
I like that because it's at the tables that I play, a lot of responses happen.
Yeah.
So split second is a bit more value than like just putting split second onto that card gives it more value and more diversity because it's both artifact and enchantment than making some saplings will be in my deck.
I think Artifact Mutation and Enchantment Mutation, yes, the upside is so good. Keep in mind, you're usually going to make like realistically 3, maybe 4 saplings. I don't think that is worth the amount that it's costing your deck to have such a narrow answer.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm fully with you.
I think like even like speaking of split second,
yeah,
I think I don't see it very often anymore, but like Angel's Grace.
Split second, you can't lose the game,
and
your opponents can't win.
Your life total goes to 1 if it would go to 0. Is it that? Does that how it works? I can't remember how Angel's Grace, because you don't die.
Pretty sure it's just you can't win. Your opponents can't win the game, and you can't lose the game.
But it must do something to damage, because otherwise you just like someone will just pass the turn and then you just lose.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's still
must do something
bad though. Like I think it's actually as bad as we remember. Are you Scryfalling it?
I am Scryfalling it. I just somehow typed in Angel's Grave. That's a very
Angel's
different
Grave.
card.
That's a different card.
You can't lose the game this turn. Your opponents can't win the game. It's got split second for 1 and a white. It's an instant. Not 1 and a white. Just a white. You can't lose the game this turn. Your opponents can't win the game this turn. Until end of turn, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead.
Sure. So it does keeps your life total up.
It does.
But look, even that, it's like so narrow, and like every other time that card will be in your hand, except the time where it saves your ass. Yeah. It's bad.
It's narrow, right?
Like it's really bad.
It's so good. It's like specifically specifically when someone is winning with a very not on board effect, I would say. If someone's trying to kill you all with Comet Storm and they've copied it 10 times and there's like 30 damage being thrown around at every opponent at this point, and then you Angel's Grace, God, that feels pretty sick. They've spent all that mana on that thing, but so much of the time...
Think about the sentence you just said, though.
Yeah.
If someone has cast Comet Storm and they've copied it 10 times, and you've got 1 white mana up, and you've got this in hand...
This is the times where it's good. I think more of the time in casual Commander, the thing that's killing you is lethal combat damage.
Yep.
And yes, someone might have used an overrun or something that's made the creatures temporarily big, but if you just cast Angel's Grace, those creatures aren't going anywhere. You still have to somehow like climb the impossible mountain that is surviving their next turn, where they just go, okay, I attack you again with my 30 goblins, you know?
Yep.
I don't know.
In the same vein, I also think there are some board wipes that are probably a bit too Magical Christmas Land as well. Sure. I'm talking about these like ridiculously high CMC ones. Like I'm thinking In Garruk's Wake, Plague Wind.
Oh, sure. The 9 mana sorceries that destroy all creatures and planeswalkers you don't control. Yeah.
Now again, Walt said it just before. If you are casting a spell that's above 6, maybe above 7 CMC, it should be winning you the game.
Yes.
If you're spending 9 mana to cast a board wipe that's, granted, it's one-sided.
It is.
That's pretty amazing. You should be able to turn that into a win.
Yeah.
Like, you should be able to then swing out with your huge board.
Definitely. Like, you should be a deck that always has a massive board.
Yeah.
And that the only thing that stops you is your opponent's creatures. If that's
because
the case,
they're blockers.
Yeah. If that's the case, in Garruk's Wake, Plague Wind, maybe they're good enough in your deck. But again, I think similar to Mnemonic Deluge.
Or if you're a Planeswalker deck, to keep your Planeswalker set.
Yes. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense there too.
Or again, if you can cheat the spell out, like my Yeleva deck used to run these cards.
Cast it for free off the top. That makes a lot of sense. If you can reduce the cost of the spell. In this case, copying is very bad. You don't want to be a copy spell deck for this. But yeah, again, you need to break these very narrow and particular answers. Because keep in mind as well, most of the time in these days when you want to cast a board wipe in Commander, it's about turn 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Maybe turn 7 or 8. And even if you've ramped a bunch, you probably won't have 9 mana and want to spend all of it only on a board wipe at turn 7 or turn 6. So,
and then, you might not have developed your board anymore, but annihilated your opponents, but then they get a whole turn to rebuild before you get a chance to win again.
There's a reason that like most of the most popular board wipes that are played right now in Commander are the ones that can be really cheap, like Toxic Deluge, like even Blasphemous Act. And it's because you mostly these days actually want to wipe everything and then be the first to recover.
Yes.
That's kind of your way out of a board wipe these days. It's not so much this kind of like destroy all your stuff, I win. It's very rare that works these days.
Or you play into the even more niche answers that synergize so strongly with your deck. Because again, when we're cutting narrow cards, we're not cutting them if they're synergizing with our deck.
No.
We're cutting them if they synergize with another deck.
Yes, or with Magical Christmas Land.
Yeah, for example, like there's a card, what's the card that returns all tokens or non-tokens to their owner's hands? It's a blue card. I can't remember what it's called.
I know
but like,
the one. It's a 5 mana blue instant.
If you're in a token build and you can bounce all non-token creatures to their opponent to their owner's hands, oh my god, you are left with a board. That is like a synergized thing. However, if you're just in a deck that has creatures and has tokens, that spell doesn't do enough for your deck.
Perplexing test.
Perplexing test. Thank you.
Choose one. Return all creature tokens to their owner's hands, or return all non-token creatures to their owner's hands.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of boards where this does not get you there.
No.
It's not good enough. Admittedly, it wraths tokens. Keep in mind, if you bounce tokens at someone's hands, it destroys them. But usually you play this in a deck where you have a bunch of tokens.
Yes.
And your goal is, okay, I'm going to return all the non-token creatures to their owner's hands.
This in a Brutaclad Telekor Engineer deck,
sick.
Big thumbs up.
Very, very
this.
cool.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that that's still bouncing your Brutaclad. Like, it's not this kind of like no downside answer that I think a lot of people phrase it as.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I want to say here is that if you are really struggling with this and it doesn't make sense to you and you want our help, on Patreon, we do have tiers of our Patreon where we will look at a deck for you and help you to revamp it, rebuild it, synergize it. We did it recently for Wizard Down Under.
Speaking of Brutaclad, we actually just did it with a Brutaclad deck on stream.
For Wizard Down Under, we did a stream and we fixed up a deck. Me and James sat down. It took us maybe an hour and a half. We had Wizard Down Under in the chat, which was really cool.
Yep.
And we actually just the other night played against Wizard Down Under's new Brutaclad deck.
Yeah, it's all done. It's all sleeved up and played, and
it's much stronger as a result of the things we did.
Quickly talk about the wedding ring play? So, okay, a very quick side tangent story of a great play-in commander. Walt played a wedding ring in his Gandalf the White deck.
Which is very cool because I get 2 copies of it. So I get to marry 2 players. Admittedly, everyone then draws cards when other people draw cards on their turns.
But it's pretty strong. In mono white, to get like an effect where you're drawing so many cards on other people's turns, that's like a great mono white play. However, one of the people he married was Wizard Down Under. Wizard Down Under was playing Brutaclad. You make a token copy of Wedding Ring, and then at the beginning of combat, you see where I'm going with this. You can make all of your tokens become a wedding ring. A wedding ring.
Yeah.
Wizard Down Under had 6 wedding rings?
I think it was 5. But it meant that every time that either of the other 2 players, me and the player 4, drew a card on our turns, Nick drew 5.
It was unbelievably cool.
It was cracked.
It was so cool to watch. And it was like,
cool.
I have to admit, we were sat on the same side of the table grinning with glee because we were like, did this thing. We
helped this to happen. Yeah, we'll happily lose games if we contributed to the decks that kill us.
100%. So yeah, check out our Patreon if you do want help with this, because Walt and I, and we will probably use this as one of our streams. We will probably do it live on stream.
If you're happy to, we'll do it on stream, and then you can get... Because we also had some input from chat. It was like a democratic process.
Deck building. Yeah. We had a lot of cards that we were like, is this good enough? And we were like on the fence, and then chat was firmly like yes or no. And we were like, okay, well, that makes our decision then.
You bloody convinced me.
Yeah, you twisted me out.
Look, there are countless reasons to include any card in any given deck, but it's a lot harder to find reasons to cut them. However, if you are aware of what to look for in these cuts and you actively apply this awareness, you'll find your decks much more focused and enjoyable to pilot as a result. We can all learn a little bit from Via Negativa. So,
Space Commanders, command received. All right, feeling good. I feel like I've shedded a lot of the unnecessary bullshit from my life. That's great.
You're not capital
A acting.
You're not capital A acting
or
anymore.
capital D deck building.
To you, capital L listeners out there, do you feel commanded? Will you be making some cuts to your decks with our principles of Via Negativa?
Yeah, you can reach out to us and tell us all those cards that you cut. Tell us why Rampaging Payless was so bad in your deck. On your choice of social media platforms, that get commanded on all of them. Or, like we were just saying, come on to our Twitch chat and talk to us live.
Yep.
Keep an eye out on our social media channels. We will be putting out a stream schedule very soon.
Yes, very soon.
Very exciting. But if you can't join us live, you can catch all of that content on our YouTube channel as well.
Yep. Definitely. And of course, the best way to support our podcast, like we mentioned, is Patreon. It's linked in the show notes. It makes a huge difference to the work that we do, and it's part of the reason we're able to give it to you so frequently. So we would like to thank our patrons, Stella Tam, Fuzzy, Bottomless Potamus, and Dyer, and an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting and Wizard Down Under for supporting us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best.
You guys are the best. You give us money when you don't have to, just because we're doing this.
You like us. You love me. You really
love me. You know who else we really love is Palms Off Gaming. These guys are awesome. They recently got shadow banned from Instagram recently. But they're back. They're back on Instagram. These guys are awesome. Check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded to get 10% off your purchase. If you need to buy a bunch more sleeves, bulk buying them from the website and getting 10% off is great.
Yep.
And you support the show while you're doing it as well. palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded.
Yeah. That's all the magic stuff, I reckon. But it is tradition at the end of the episode for us to planeswalk out of Magic into somewhere else. James, I think it's your turn.
It is my turn, and I'm going to be planeswalking us to the movie theater.
Okay.
Not the theater, the movie theater.
The one that Grotowski hated? No,
yes.
It's not true.
Damn it, they're doing too many fancy things.
Yeah, it looks
put
too
an
good.
actor on stage. I went to Cinema Nova.
Independent Cinema in Carlton.
Love Cinema Nova. It's a great spot if you're looking at getting cheap tickets, which is great.
So much cheaper than the big theaters.
Hoyts and Village, just so expensive. I went with a couple of friends and my partner, and we saw... I'm going to just put a bit of a trigger warning at the top here for suicidal content.
Sure.
Just for any listeners that want to turn off now. See you later.
Boy.
But we saw a film called Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person.
Me and Electra saw Dune, we saw something at Cinema Nova recently and saw the trailer for this. It looked really good.
unbelievably good. It's a French-Canadian film,
Cool.
so it's all in French and it's subtitled.
Yep.
So if you hate films like that, see if there's a dubbed version somewhere.
Yeah,
but it's
subtitles you get over very quickly. Much faster than you'd think.
You learn
just
how
blend it
to
in.
watch and read at the same time.
You definitely do.
I will also say that the stylization of how it was shot, I'm gonna. Wes Anderson, if you're familiar with Wes Anderson's work, it's very familiar to that. Very symmetrical.
Yeah.
No moving shots, like no dolly shots. It was all stable shots.
Sure.
Which makes reading subtitles 10 times easier.
Definitely.
But effectively, I'm going to give you like a rundown of the plot. It's not really spoiling the movie because the freaking title basically spoils it. There's a vampire called Sasha, and she doesn't want to eat people. She's a humanist vampire. She actually thinks that people should live.
Sure.
So she seeks out a suicidal person so she
can feed off someone who is willing to die for the sake of her being fed.
And it's really it's described as horror in the description.
Right.
It's not horror. It's this weird macabre comedy.
Sort of a black comedy, you'd probably call it, right?
Yeah, black comedy is that's definitely a category of film that this fits into quite well. I just really, really enjoyed it for the sake that it was like a take on vampires that was really raw and based in reality.
Right.
It was like really unapologetically like, no, this is what would actually happen if vampires existed among us.
Okay.
You know, like there were vampire doctors that worked at a doctor's surgery, but the vampires like knew that they were the vampire doctor, so they would visit that doctor specifically.
So a very like, okay, if there were vampires around us, what would the world actually look like?
Yeah.
Not like they're supernatural beings that we worship. Like, no, they'd probably just walk around and be people like the rest of us.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. And I just loved the stylization of the film. Like I said, it's very Wes Anderson, but it was like almost if Wes Anderson and maybe Quentin Tarantino as another director of had a bit of a weird macabre baby.
Little black comedy baby.
Yeah, basically. I mean, Tarantino does a lot of that kind of black comedy in his films as well. Yeah. I thought it was really, really good. And if you're into kind of independent like movie theaters and like small films, I think this is showing maybe once or twice more in Nova Cinema for the next couple of weeks.
But I'm sure
go check it out.
There would definitely, maybe this is a call out for those of you who are not in Melbourne. There will be somewhere near you that is a small independent theater if you live in a major city, and they will be playing films that you would not normally see if you went to your big commercial cinema chain, and you'll see some really interesting stuff that you would not normally see, and it will really expand your horizons, I think, for what a film can look like and what you can learn from a film.
Yeah, not every film is a blockbuster $10 million money-making machine that has Iron Man played by Robert Downey Jr. Some films are like actors you have never seen before, directors you've never heard of, in a language you don't speak. And it really, really was an enjoyable experience. I love that film, and I'm actually very tempted to go see it again.
Yeah, sweet. I mean, like, even big actors sometimes will do these films. Like, if you have an actor that you really enjoy, or even one that you don't. Like, I'm not going to lie, Nicolas Cage, I find his performances very all over the place in terms of what he gives. He did a brilliant film called Pig. I don't know if
I think you told me about this.
I loved it. I watched it when I was up visiting some of my partner's family, and me and her, my partner, loved it. The family was like, that was the worst film we've ever seen.
Well, like, I've seen Willem Dafoe.
Did you see The Lighthouse with...
I didn't see The Lighthouse.
Okay. He's done a lot of indie films,
the one I saw was his portrayal of Vincent van Gogh.
Sure,
that was very, very impressive. Like, it was a very dark film, to be fair, but like really, like, you know, I know Willem Dafoe from The Green Goblin and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Seeing him do that, I was like, oh my God, this guy is like Shakespearean.
The thing, like, as an actor, those are the best roles. Like, it's so good, especially when you get cast a bunch of, like, when I was at uni, I got cast as the sort of romantic lead a lot. It's cool. Like, I mean, look flattering.
At him. The flowing locks of hair, the blue eyes.
It's flattering. Like, I'm just like a young guy who's like reasonably fit. Like, it makes sense. Like, I get cast as the romantic lead or whatever. But like, I loved every time I got cast as a weirdo, because I was like, actually, I have a bunch of things I can do that aren't just portraying someone who is in love or someone who is tragic or has some tragic thing happen to them, I have all these other dimensions to myself as a performer. And so I respect actors who do this a lot.
And it really expands your horizons.
It does.
If there's anything from this Planeswalk to take away is go to an independent cinema and check out some films that you've never heard of before, like Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person.
Definitely.
Sounds like a old Genesis song title, to be fair.
It does a bit. Yeah. No, check out artists exploring new work, for sure.
For sure.
That's all we have time for. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Good. Bye, Command Players.
Bye.